Okay, because of things going on this week, I'm taping both retro reviews on the same day. So if I get a little confused, well, that's usually me, isn't it? Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, and in this Deep Space Nine episode, which is episode 8 of the first season, we have our first opportunity to really define DAX and the relationship that DAX and Cisco have. It's been kind of suggested, and we know something about the Trill race from a TNG episode, but we don't have as much backstory as it's given here. This was written by Dorothy Fontana, D.C. Fontana, who was the script editor in the original series, wrote some of the better scripts for that show, and probably ghost wrote even more, and also was a consultant on Next Generation and actually wrote this episode. And it was a good way, a good person to choose to flesh out this character. While we knew heretofore that Dax and Jadzia were joined together only a couple of years ago, and the last time that Cisco had seen Dax was when Dax was paired with Curzon, and Curzon Dax was someone who was considerably older than Cisco and was a mentor to him. And we know about that much, and that they were friends and hardly anything else. So this episode, they fill in all of the details, or at least a number of the details in the backstory here. First of all, we find out what a Trill really is. A Trill is a symbiote and a host. And the symbiote does not take over the host. The symbiote has kind of a mind meld, shall we say, with the host. And so every time that a host dies, the symbiote is moved to a different host, and then they become a different personality, having all of the memories of the previous hosts. So with about any number of different hosts, a Trill can live for centuries. And so it was that they established, even in the pilot episode, that Dax was probably about 300 years old, but in different bodies over that time. So that is the reason, of course, that Cisco refers to Jadzia as old man, is because he prefers to remember the Dax that he knew as a young ensign. They establish in this story, as a young ensign, Dax had taken him under his wing, taught him everything about diplomacy and of life in general. And while he was not the most orthodox of people, according to Cisco, he was a very honorable man. And it is shown through this episode that that honorableness passed from the symbiote to even the next host, as Jadzia refuses to defend herself for the extradition charges. And it's not because she was guilty or that Curzon was guilty, but rather that she was protecting someone. And that's what it brings out in this episode. Otherwise, a good episode. I mean, it's one of those where you know from the get-go they're going to get her off, because they say, oh, we're going to take her and put her in prison for 20 years or give her the death penalty or whatever. And so, that's not going to happen. So the interest in this story then is what you can find in the character development and using the trial in order to basically do that exposition is a clever way of doing it. Reminds me a little bit of Measure of a Man in The Next Generation, where they similarly define data in that way in the form of a trial or a hearing in order to establish whether he is human or whether he is sentient or if he's just a machine and property. In this case, we find out more about Trills. Trills, of course, are different people every time that the host is changed, although the memories go all the way back from the symbiote. So what we have in the relationship between Jadzia and Cisco is based on Dax's memories of being Curzon and Cisco's friend and mentor. And that's, of course, what Cisco goes on to. And it's because it causes some uneasiness sometimes in his dealings with Dax. Dax knows everything about him, but looks like Jadzia now. And Jadzia, being a different person who they establish in this episode, was in her mid-20s when she was joined with the DAX symbiote, and so she had 4 degrees and had quite a few accomplishments of her own and a sense of honor of her own. And so this is a different person than who Cisco knew. And so there is this thing almost annoying to Jadzia that he knows her already, but he doesn't. Whereas, on the other hand, as Dax, they are well acquainted, and she is familiar with him as Curzon was. So it's kind of an interesting thing that they have there. The Bajoran judge, who is 100 years old, she said that she wanted to get this hearing done before dinner and not before my senility. I thought that was a good line. But otherwise, it was a very well done thing, and it tells us a whole lot about the Trills. It tells us a whole lot about Dax. It tells us a whole lot about Cisco and the relationship that he has. Also, the reason that Jadzia is not so interested in associating too much with Bashir. He does kind of make her chuckle, but at the same time, he doesn't realize who and what she is, and she does not really want to get serious with him. As we said later on in the series, Bashir becomes more than just a person who's trying to fraternize with Dax and becomes a better character as a result. But they have hints of that here, where he is shown to have quite a bit of medical knowledge and quite a bit of expertise on the Trill. So this helps out a little bit there. Anyway, I recommend it. It's something that's worth not only one viewing, but repeated viewings, just to kind of get the character lined up, because it is kind of confusing when you have basically 2 different people who are kind of the same person, but kind of not. And so that's how they play this. And there will be more DAX episodes as they let over more little details about this that may or may not correspond with what they've said now. But this is a good beginning of it. I'd like to know what you think about it. Please put it in the comments below. And, of course, subscribe and like the channel if you will. And when we come back, which will be very soon, we will actually tomorrow, we'll have a review of The Trouble with Tribbles on the original series. And, of course, we'll have the latest on Friday of the Strange New Worlds episode, which will be about Ensign Uhura and some other supernatural things. So, until we see you then, don't go far.